Hello, everybody. So my name is Dao Huong Tra. I am from the University of Languages and International Studies from Vietnam National University. And today I would like to present my study on students' affective responses to teacher feedback in an EFL writing class. My study can be divided into 5 main parts here. As you can see on the screen: introduction, literature review, methodology, results and findings, and the conclusion. Now let's talk about first the reason why I chose to conduct this study. So in every EFL writing class, the teacher feedback is a crucial part, and the learner's responses to teacher feedback determines the quality of student performance and learning outcomes. And not only that, they can also guide the teachers in refining their feedback practices. So in order to study the responses to teacher feedback, in 2010, Ellis published his framework, which stated that the learner's responses to teacher feedback is a construct that can be divided into 3 key dimensions, which are cognitive, behavioral, and affective responses. And the affective responses here are the key or the focus of my study. This is because the importance of this dimension in my context, which is Vietnamese EFL contexts, has not gained much traction. So because of that, my study aims to explore the ways in which Vietnamese learners at a tertiary level EFL writing class effectively respond to teacher feedback on their essays. And the guiding question of my study is, how do students effectively respond to teacher feedback on their essays? Okay, so let's move on to the next part of my study, which is the literature review. Here I will present some existing literature related to students' responses to teacher feedback. So Highland and Highland 2001 said that students can be considered as active agents of the feedback process, and therefore their feelings should be understood for the teacher feedback to be effective. Similarly, according to Storch and Wigglesworth in 2010, the students' emotional responses and attitudes can affect the actions that they adopt and have an impact on feedback retainment. Okay, so this is why it's very important to study the emotional responses of students and the attitudes of students toward the teacher feedback. Okay, so the frameworks that I used here in my study, the foundation is, like I said, Ellis framework in 2010. However, that framework was created just for all feedback in general, whereas here I want to focus more on written feedback in a writing class. So I adopted Han and Highland framework because that is an adapted model that has been tailored to analyzing the responses specifically with written feedback. So this is that framework right here from Han and Highland in 2015. They basically divided affective responses into 2 subdimensions, which are emotional responses and attitudinal responses. So emotional responses can be things like anxious, overwhelmed, disappointed, happy. So these are the learner's emotional reactions toward feedback upon receiving the feedback, or it can be the change of their emotional reactions during and after revision. As for attitudinal responses, these had to do with the learner's overall attitudes toward feedback that is revealed throughout the revision process. They can be positive, they can be negative, though they can be mixed. And on the screen here, I also show some examples of these subdimensions. Okay, so those were the framework or the theoretical foundation of my study. For the next part, I would like to talk about the methodology. So first of all, I chose to adopt qualitative case study to answer the research question because I believe with case study, especially a qualitative case study, I will be able to gain rich and detailed information about the student's response. Since I conducted my research in EFL setting, I choose the context of a second-year academic English course for students at a university in Hanoi. And in here, the students have to write three draft writing entries for an assignment called the writing portfolio. So basically, this is the process. They first wrote draft 1, and then they got peer feedback on that draft. And then they wrote draft 2, and then they received teachers' feedback on that as well. And then at home, they wrote draft 3, which is the final draft, by revising draft 2. So I chose a class by Miss Phương. This is just her pseudonym. In this class, Ms. Phương tends to give feedback on both the content and the language aspects of her students' writing. And she also asked her students to write 3 drafts. Okay, what about the students? So these are the 4 students that I chose. Again, all of the names here are pseudonyms. So they are Phan, Vi, Duyên, and Kim Anh. And at the point of the study, they were all from 19 to 20 years old. They were recruited based on their previous writing scores, which was around the average score of the whole class. I also based on teachers' recommendation and the students' agreement to participate in my study. At the time of the study, the participants here only had some experience with writing and feedback from their first year at university. So I believe with that, there would be a lot of opportunities for feedback, and therefore I will have a lot of data to gather and to study from. Okay, so how did I collect the data? So I divided my procedure into 4 phases here. In phase 1, the student had to write draft 1. They got peer feedback on draft 1. In phase 2, they participated in the first interview with me, where I asked them about general information, their background, their overall belief and feelings towards feedback and revision. In the same phase, they also wrote draft 2 and submitted draft 2 to the teacher. So before they submitted draft 2 to the teacher, I asked them to make a photocopy, and I collected the photocopy of their draft. In phase number 3, they received the teacher feedback on draft 2. I also collected a copy of the draft with the teacher feedback to study in the later phase, in the later section of my study. In here, the students also participated in a Think Aloud session, where immediately after they received the teacher feedback, they shared with the researcher their feelings, their immediate emotional responses, basically, on the feedback that they received. And finally, 1 week after the Think Aloud session, week number 4 or phase number 4, the students participated in the second interview, where I asked them to reflect on the whole writing and revision process, and I focused on their emotions and their attitudes. So from the data that I was able to collect, I carried out data analysis For the writing drafts, I did textual analysis where I basically coded all the feedback from the teacher to identify the types of feedback that she gave her students. And the data from the think aloud sessions in the interviews, what about them? So I recorded, I transcribed, and I translated them into English because originally all of the think aloud protocols and interviews were done in Vietnamese. So with the data from here, I did data reduction for information only related to affective responses. And after that, I coded them along the subdimensions in Han and Highlands frameworks. Okay, so let's come to the exciting part, which is the findings and the discussion. So on the screen here, I have the types of teacher feedback that the students received. As we can see, the total number of feedback points of the participant in here ranged from 11 to 16. The number of each type of feedback here actually saw no significant differences. Look at the number here. And also we can see that the most common type of feedback that the students received was error codes. And these error codes indicated the grammatical errors or the content issues such as coherence. Okay, so with all of those feedbacks that the students received, so how did they responded or how did they reacted? Let's talk about the emotional reactions or responses first. Well, initially, Duyên was a little bit disappointed about the number of errors because she had anticipated more positive feedback. This is given the time and the effort that she had invested in the assignment. So, naturally, she had hoped for more. And by more here, I mean like more positive comments or more, or like fewer number of errors from the teacher. In terms of Kim Anh, she was surprised and also disheartened by the volume of feedback that she received. For V, she was also overwhelmed with the concern about the extensive feedback points that she got. However, after showing her overwhelmed feelings, she quickly attempted to regulate her emotions by examining and analyzing the errors to see what types of errors she received and whether those errors were serious or not. For Fan, she was sad as well, but her modest expectations about the outcome helped her avoid disappointment because prior to receiving the feedback from the teacher, she already thought that she did not do well on the writing, so she did not expect much. Okay, what about afterwards? So after they did the revision, more positive emotions emerged during and after the revision process. And for Duyên and Kim Anh, they had a clear understanding of what to do, and they also adopted a systematic approach to revision. And so in the interview, they reported feeling more confident, more composed. Okay, so from that findings, what discussion could be made here? So the initial reactions, which were a little bit negative, are actually echoed in previous studies by Hyland, Mahfood, and Pearson. The excessive amount of feedback to a lot of students, they may be disheartening, or they even could lead to procrastination in revision. One possible explanation for this is that students, they often perceive assessment tasks, like the writing portfolio, as a reflection of their knowledge and skills. And because of that, they often feel disappointed, they often feel sad or even overwhelmed when a more knowledgeable individual, the teacher in this case, points out their inadequacies or in their weaknesses. Well, and another point that I would like to present is that the metacognitive regulations, like planning, like analyzing the feedback errors, could actually ensure the coordination of knowledge and effective processes. And like we said, like we saw earlier, these metacognitive regulations could help students feel more confident, more calm, and overall more positive about the feedback that they received and the revision process. All right, next, let's look at the attitudinal responses from the students. So for Fan, she was satisfied with her revision journey. She was excited and motivated because the revision she did really helped her identify the areas in her writing that still required further improvement. For Zuyun and Kimang, they actually showed confidence and focus as well. They no longer felt the sense of disappointment that they felt upon receiving the comments because they had time to process, they had time to really study the feedback and worked with the feedback. For V, she actually experienced mixed feelings. On the one hand, she valued the feedback that she received because it helped her identify strengths and weaknesses. On the other hand, she needed more time writing practice to train for her exams. So she did not like all like 2 or 3 rounds of revisions and receiving a lot of comments. And she was not really into that. And another interesting point that I found here is that Kimang, she said that she would like more positive comments, praises, from teachers, because she mostly just got a lot of critical comments, a lot of errors from her teachers. So she would like something more positive. Yeah, and the findings that I just presented are actually consistent with earlier research on this topic. For the most part, students will appreciate and embrace teacher feedback, primarily due to the suggestions for improvement that the feedback could offer. However, in terms of the teacher praise, like I said earlier, Highland in 2001 and Groland in 2015, they did suggest that the teacher praise could help students recognize the strengths in their writing, enhances their self-esteem, and foster motivation to learn. So teachers could consider giving more praises or more positive comments while giving feedback to their students. However, there's also a note here from Rosali and Jubri. Actually, criticism-based feedback can also result in something positive because this kind of feedback could lead to more successful revisions, as it tends to be more specific and more constructive than just praises. Okay, so those are the findings and also some discussions that I would like to present to shed light on the students' responses to teachers' written feedback. Okay, so from all of those, what are the implications that can be drawn out? Well, we can see that insights into how students effectively respond to feedback, which, by the way, might not always be observable by teachers in class, are essential. And so that is why teachers are suggested to try to understand more about students' backgrounds, emotions, motivations, beliefs, all those kind of things. Because with that, they can give more positive, they can promote more positive responses from the students, and their feedback giving practice will also be more effective. Well, of course, my study also had some limitations. The first one is the limited number of participants. Even though this is a case study, so it will not require a lot of participants, but I do believe that a larger number, like maybe 8 or 10 participants, will yield richer and more detailed and more diverse findings for future research. And there's also a need for a more longitudinal study design, because my study also only occurred in like a month, 4 phases, which is 4 weeks. So I believe that other scientists or researchers could do a more longitudinal design in, say, like 2 months, 3 months, or even the whole semester, to see how students' responses evolved and changed after time. Okay, so I think I can wrap up my study here, my presentation here. I would like to say thank you for paying attention and for listening to my presentation. If you have any questions or anything that you want to share with me regarding this topic, please feel free to email me. I would like to, and I will definitely get back to you as soon as I can. Okay, thank you very much.